Welcome to the Aviator podcast. The first, hopefully not the last episode. This is a Aviation podcast. We're going to be talking about the Aviation world with you guys. My name's Andy Gerswald. You might have seen me on social media, but probably not, as the Valley Egg Pilot. And I've got a good friend with me today, Chad Pites. And what we're going to do is introduce the podcast to you guys. What the purpose and intentions of this podcast is going to be, some disclaimers, and not just drill down on one specific topic, but we're going to talk about the egg aviation industry in general, talk about the alleged egg pilot shortage, and then we're just going to talk a little bit about the lifestyle of being an egg pilot and kind of the mentality you need to have to be in the industry. So with that, the Egg Aviator podcast spools up now. All right, guys. Well, welcome. Like I said before, we're going to introduce the podcast to you today. My name's Andy Gerswald, the Valley Egg Pilot, and I have with me Chad Pites, a former coworker, has-been egg pilot. He's going to share a little bit about his experience.
I'm just washed up now.
What's that?
I'm just washed up.
Yeah, it's all right. You know, you might be smarter than the rest of us. I guess we'll find out. Either you'll talk me into being a PC-12 driver, or maybe I'll talk you back into being an egg pilot, but I kind of feel like the first is probably the better option. So
when you get two people so stubborn, no one's changing.
No, I don't think so. I think we've butted heads on this enough. I told you I'm going to be an egg pilot till I'm 60 years old. So a little bit about the guys that you're talking to right now to preface our experience and you know what kind of a perspective that me and Chad are talking from. So I got into the egg aviation industry 4 years ago. I loaded in South Dakota for 2 years. Ended up having a job open up back in my hometown in northwestern Minnesota. Moved back here, flew a Cessna egg truck for one season here in Minnesota. Decided that I wanted to do something a little different and ended up going out to Devil's Lake, North Dakota and flying a 402 out there. So I've got 2 years of experience under my belt. With that, I got Chad Pites with me today. Chad, can you tell us a little bit about your history in the egg aviation industry?
Yeah, like Andy said, I'm Chad Pites. I met Andy at the University of Minnesota in Crookston there. We both did the egg aviation program. From there, I got a job loading for 1 year in Crookston. The year after that, I flew a Cessna egg wagon, and then I flew a 502, so I have 2 years of experience. Then once I was done in the 502, I just decided to hang it up and try something new, and now I fly PC-12s for a fractional company.
How was it going from the egg industry to going to fly a PC-12 for hauling passengers?
It was a bit of an adjustment, flying people around, working with, the bigger airspace out in New York or even down in Florida, Chicago, talking to people. I used to use the radio in the airplane, and you talk to a couple people that are landing here and there to wherever you're flying out of, but now you talk to a lot more people. The instrument flying is a little different than the egg flying, that's for sure. But they both have, days that can be tough and days that can be easy.
It's funny because I got to fly a Bonanza last year, and even just like flying the Bonanza, that's a fast airplane, and he let me fly it for a while. And when you're coming down even from like 6,000 feet, it's not like the 402 or it's not like the Archer that was a rock that you and me flew in college, where it's like, I'm coming in a little fast. I'm just going to throw the gear down and chop the power back. Like, you have to be ahead of that plane to be at your altitudes, at your airspeeds. Not only that, but you're navigating, talking to ATC. Like, I know, I know some of us in the egg industry are like, well, we're the top cheese, but it definitely takes some work to do what you're doing too.
And even the crop dusting experience, it all helps in any sort of flying, especially with the stick and rudder skills. Egg flying definitely did not help my communication skills on the radios, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, we didn't talk too much on the radio during the summertime. Maybe we were BSing back and forth, but there wasn't too much air traffic control, that's for sure. So that's Chad Pites. Thanks for taking the time to come on and talk with me. I know you're
you bet.
You're off duty right now, so you're not doing squad anyways.
No, it's pretty busy.
Yeah.
Got a lot going on today. Make a podcast.
Yeah, a lot going on. Cooking chili, making podcasts. Yeah.
Yep.
So now we're going to roll in and introduce and show you the purpose of this podcast. So our first and foremost purpose, intention, is to promote the ag aviation industry kind of as a whole, the industry itself, and then also the ag aviation businesses that are within the industry that are providing us new products, new technology that make our life easier and also make our applications better. But the biggest thing with ag aviation that I want to do is promote safety by sharing pilot experiences. And the best way I can describe that is through our PASS program. PASS is a safety program that's put on by the NAAA through our state applicator meetings. And they, a lot of the times, share pilot experiences, talking about wire strikes, talking about engine failures, dumping loads on takeoff. That was a really good one. And I am not saying that I am going to I'm some substitute for PASS. That's not what I am. PASS is a very well organized, well put together, and the presenters, I think, also really make PASS too. You got guys with a lot of experience that really know how to communicate information and tell these guys the stories. So again, just to preface, I'm not trying to be PASS, but I would like a platform where we as pilots in the ag aviation industry can come, we can talk about our screw-ups, we can talk about our successes, and hopefully we can all learn from that. I mean, I'm only a second-year pilot, so I think this is going to be an educational experience just for me, and I hope it is for other guys too. There isn't a pile of information out about the industry, and hopefully that kind of fills that void. Our next goal, purpose, intention is to build a stronger relationship with growers, kind of through discussion with them. We got Will is probably going to be on here. He was farmed off the strip we flew off of my first year. And we're going to talk to guys like him about how ag aviation is used in their operation, how it positively affects them, and we also kind of want to address some of the things that growers might not like about it. I'm not going to sit here and blow unicorn dust and roses all over everybody. I mean, our relationship, it isn't always perfect. And the nice thing about loading in a couple different states was I got to interact with the growers, and the relationship between applicators and growers kind of changes depending on the region that they're in. So hopefully we can get some guys that aren't just from Flatland Square, Minnesota, to talk about how ag aviation is used as a tool in their toolbox. The third goal is to share experiences with the rest of the aviation community. One way to kind of describe this, and maybe this is just a us problem up here near Grand Forks, North Dakota, is that we got UND right across the river. I'm sure there's some guys out there that go to UND or have. You've got a lot of training airplanes and a lot of ag planes trying to fly out of every public airport up here during the middle of the summer, and we aren't always on speaking terms with each other. Me and Chad can attest to that. We've had our fair share of run-ins where we get into some traffic issues, but I think it kind of comes from both sides. It's like a lack of communication from us to communicate with them about how we need to work together to just get through the traffic pattern. And also I know I've ran into a few people outside of our aviation industry. I remember talking to a family member of mine that was an airline pilot, and when I was a kid, I wanted to be an airline pilot for the longest time, and then I started farming and realized that, no, I'd rather be an ag pilot. Well, I remember when I called him and I told him that I wanted to be an ag pilot, it was like his heart sunk. It was like, oh, kind of, and I think the mentality was, it's like, well, those guys are just a bunch of ho-dunk rednecks that are just doing adrenaline flying, and that's just not the case. I mean, some of the most professional pilots I know are ag pilots, and it'd be awesome to share our experiences with other industries in aviation and also hear from them as well. I hate to use our society's famous buzzword right now, but it's not bad to diversify our pilot skills. I'm sure there's things, Chad, that you can apply from flying a PC-12. Maybe it's checklist discipline or whatever that might translate into you being a better aerial applicator if and when you decide to do that.
Right.
So with that, we're going to move into some disclaimers or things that are not intended for this podcast. Nobody here is ever going to claim to know it all. Like I said, I wanted to preface our experience at the beginning so those of you who are out there listening, you understand where our point of views are coming from, and that's rookie pilots. One of my best mentors told me that it takes 3 years to make an ag pilot, and what he meant by that is it takes 3 years of experience for you to go out on your own and do anything that's asked of you on your own, kind of without question. By that definition, we haven't quite earned our wings fully yet. So that means that all of our opinions are subject to change. So we're going to share our experiences with you guys, and we're going to share our opinions, but those aren't set in stone. Those are subject to change. I've got a lot of flying ahead of me in ag left, and there's still plenty to learn. So just because I say something now doesn't mean if somebody comes back with something better that I won't change my opinion on things. Our second disclaimer for the podcast is this will not ever be a pecker competition. And what I mean by that is that this isn't going to be a platform for anybody, including myself, Chad, anybody that we have on to boast about what they do. This is about learning. It's not about comparing things. We don't need to be sharing our acres. I'm never going to ask anybody to share their acres, share exactly the hours they fly and things like that. I don't think there's a problem, with saying on average, this is what people in this area do for acres, or let's say in the Red River Valley, on average pilots spray 300 hours a season. I don't see anything wrong with that, but I tell Chad all the time, if I ever start sounding like a jackass, please wrap me upside the head. So if this ever starts to turn into that, Chad will hit me upside the head. So the next thing I have to say is, any of the advice or any of the experiences you hear on here, you're free to do whatever you want with that, but we don't want you to go to your airport and rent the plane and go fly across a field or try to do any of the things that anybody's talking about on here. Don't go out and do anything that you might regret.
And no means is any of this instructional advice.
No.
Any of this.
It's just kind of educational stuff. So don't take it and do anything stupid. Next, this platform is not going to be used for destroying anyone's name or reputation. I don't want people coming on here going, don't work for XYZ operator, don't hire XYZ pilot, don't hire XYZ loader, whatever. We don't need any of that. But one thing I do want to do is I want us to be able to share some bad experiences that we have had, so that if that's going on somewhere in the industry, it doesn't get normalized. So for instance, if we have a pilot on who previously worked for an operator who will stay unnamed, that didn't care about them at all and was never looking out for them, worked them like a dog, whatever, put them in unsafe situations, I don't want somebody to not share that experience, because we do have a lot of young guys getting in the industry, and when you're really excited about getting into the industry, you'll do whatever it takes to become an ag pilot. But we need to be careful about, some of the decisions that we're making. You want to work in this industry, but it's a very dangerous industry. So you want to do it right. So you want to find an operator who has good intentions for you and your future. So that's, I hope I did a decent job of explaining that. I've had a really hard time trying to figure out how I was going to describe that point. But all right, let's talk ag aviation in general. Ag aviation, aerial application, ag pilots, whatever you want to call it, crop dusters. Do we need to be politically correct and not call ourselves crop dusters?
I think people get hung up on that name for some reason or the other.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know
it is, in its essence, that's what we do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I get that other side of the argument, like, well, there's some bad voodoo attached to this name because, back in the day when we were actually putting dust out, or DDT or whatever. I guess my opinion is you got to know where you came from to get where you're going. So I guess I'm not really ashamed to be called a crop duster. That's what we are. Aerial applicators is a professional term. Chad, I remember in college you did a presentation on your internship for the summer as a loader. What did you call what was the professional term?
Oh man. hydrochemical engineer or technician, something like
aerial
that.
hydrochemical specialist. I was in the room when you did that. You're like, you got to, and this is at a liberal university. He gets up at the front of the room and says, I'm Chad Pites, and over this summer, I was an aerial hydrochemical specialist, and everybody in the room was like, oh, very, very professional. Yeah. AKA,
yeah, and they printed that in the magazine too.
Yeah. Whatever you want to call us. Egg pilots, aerial applicators, we apply crop protection products, i.e. fungicides, insecticides, herbicides, fertilizers by air, and we also seed cover crops. I know last year, when it was really wet in Nebraska, there were even some people who spread some soybeans via airplane. I couldn't tell you how that went, but anyways, it's been done before. And there's also places in like Arkansas and other states where people grow rice that they're seeding rice by airplane and all the time. So we're going to get into some statistics about the industry. All my statistics that I got come right from the NAAA, National Agricultural Aviation Association. I'm a member of that. I believe Chad was a member of that when he was an egg pilot.
Yep.
They did a industry census back in 2019, and ag aviation covered 127 million acres in 2019. So when you take that into all the cropland in the United States, which is around 400 million acres, that's 28%. So I remember when I first decided that I wanted to be an egg pilot, I was a farmhand at the time, and one of the guys I was working with was like, why the hell do you want to go be an egg pilot? We have ground sprayers. And I was like, should I not go do this? Well, I don't really see the need for an airplane. Then it rained that entire summer, and here we are, applying half our organic stuff by air. But anyways, I think depending on where you're at in the country, sometimes ag aviation plays a huge part in your operation, and sometimes it plays kind of a small role. But either way, 28% of the total acres in the United States is a substantial amount. I mean, I would say if the ag aviation industry was to go away tomorrow, there would be some farms that are hurting because our services aren't going to be there. So not only do aerial applicators take care of crops, but we also take care of a lot of forestry in the United States. And by that, I mean 100% of forestry that is treated with fertilizer. I think they spray for bugs and for fungus every once in a while too, but I know it's mainly just they're fertilizing timberland. A lot of egg pilots who are off during the winter times, they can find a job somewhere, or an operator lines up a job for them to go take care of forestry during the wintertime. That's not a huge thing. I don't know. I think I know one person that's gone and done forestry before, but not a lot. So in the United States, there's a total of 1,560 aerial application businesses, and there's 3,400 egg pilots total. So that's not a lot of people in the United States. And then there's just a breakdown of those 3,400 pilots. 2,000 are hired pilots, meaning they are hired by an operator to fly somebody else's airplane. And then 1,400 of those are operators. And when we say operator, we mean the owner of the business. That's, well, I guess we'll say owner-operator. Most of the time, the general term is just operator. They own a business and they fly one of their own airplanes. That's a breakdown of the pilots. And then also a lot of aerial firefighting. So when we talk, I know we use the term seats for getting like a seat in an ag plane, but SEAT really stands for single engine air tanker in the rest of the aviation world. So if you're a guy that wants to go fly a fire boss on whip air floats or whatever, typically those companies require sometimes a significant amount of egg time. I think I've seen like 1,500 hours. That's just a guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know a couple of guys in the industry that came to train to be a aerial firefighter and have never left.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know quite a few people who are the same that came to ag and said, yeah, I'm just here to be a firefighter, but I haven't seen them make the move yet.
Nope.
Maybe there's something good about being an egg pilot, I guess. Before I move on to our next topic really quick, this is a sponsored podcast, and it has to be that way because if it wasn't sponsored, we wouldn't have a podcast. So I got to say big thank you to Travis Am for sponsoring this podcast. He assisted me in purchasing the equipment to do this, and in return, we're going to promote his business. Travis is an egg pilot making custom egg aviation parts, primarily for Air Tractor, and he is also developing our kind of first online egg aviation store. So Travis's vision is to have a website online where you can go and you can get your, let's say your nozzle parts, diaphragms, whatever. And instead of making 15 phone calls to go find some part you need, you can just hop right on that website. You can find the part you're looking for and order it, and it's on its way. Now, he's just kind of in the process of getting going right now. I know he's selling a couple nozzle part, Egg Pilot X systems, a few smoker oil tanks, things like that. So there's a few miscellaneous parts on there that he's selling, but he's in the process of growing that and making it bigger to offer more products online. Let's talk quick about what he makes himself. He's an Egg Pilot building parts for Egg Pilot. So this year, my boss and I had his mirrors that he designed on our airplanes. If you're interested in checking out what Travis has to offer, you can go to his website, americandesigns.com. That's spelled AMBERICAN designs.com. Again, thanks, Travis. Go check out what he has to offer on americandesigns.com. Now we're going to talk a little bit kind of the general purpose of Egg Aviation. Like I said earlier, we're applying crop protection products, but it's also a fast and economical way to get these products onto crops. So a lot of times, I think majority of growers all use aerial application typically for insect infestation, because when there's a pest outbreak, the population is growing fast. We need to get this knocked out before it causes any economic damage to the crop. So they get a hold of us because we can knock out some acres per hour. You can get a lot of acres covered in a short period of time. I'll just say typically on average, I know that, let's say a 500-gallon airplane, kind of depending on gallons per acre they're running, can get about 2,000 acres done in a day. So that's just kind of a rough average. If you've got 2,000 acres of soybeans and they're infested with aphids, you can call an aerial applicator and they can get it done that day. That is if there isn't 20,000 acres in front of you, I guess. Another reason why growers will contact an aerial applicator is because of wet conditions. I have flown over my fair share of stuck sprayers in the field, and I'm sure people are very not happy to see the airplane fly over while they're trying to tug their sprayer out. But that's typically when we get called. Like this last year you and me flew together is pretty dry, and we kind of did our wheat fungicide run, which is pretty typical up here. We really didn't get busy again until we got some rain and we started doing some sugar beets. But this last summer we had good rain. Farmers, instead of going out trampling crop and throwing mud all over the place, they decide to call us and have us go out there and do it. So another reason why people call aerial applicators is they don't want to run over crop. So let's talk about corn country for a little bit. If you go down to Iowa, Nebraska, southern Minnesota, Kansas, all those, the corn belt, you're going to see a lot of airplanes during fungicide season because the corn just gets to a height where their ground sprayers can't reach the top of the crop canopy. They do make some sprayers that are out there right now running down corn. Solid majority of all the corn is getting sprayed by airplanes down there. Even around here, like I said, in the Red River Valley, we have a lot of square fields, not too many pies or rough round edges or anything like that. So people don't make a ton of tracks spraying a perfectly square field. But if you get out to where I'm at now in Prairie Pothole region, we have a lot of potholes, and if you're going to drive around every single one of those, you're going to run over a lot of crop. So we get a decent amount of business just from that, but at the same time, if you're out spraying a quarter that's 60% tillable, you're flying an entire quarter and your productivity is kind of down because there's only 120 acres out there. But up next on our agenda, we're talking about what licenses are required of aerial applicators. When you become an egg pilot, you tell somebody, yeah, I'm an egg pilot or I'm a crop duster. Oh, you decided not to be a commercial pilot, huh? So you're not a commercial pilot. No, I am a commercial pilot. Well, but you're not flying commercial. Technically, I am because I am being paid to fly. But anyways, so egg pilots are required to hold a commercial pilot's license and a tailwheel endorsement because all the egg planes in the United States are tailwheel airplanes, meaning that their third gear is at the tail. Typically, the only time I've ever seen a trike egg plane is some of the videos from that guy in New Zealand, I think it is. They've got that white one that they dump fertilizer like behind the canopy. It's a pretty interesting airplane.
Even with egg aviation and commercial pilots, a lot of people think there's airline pilots and there's weekend warriors. Yeah. There's only two groups.
Yep.
Now they don't know there's egg aviation or even the private side that I'm in now. a lot of them just don't understand what any of us really do.
Yeah, or what licenses and standards you're held to. Like
right.
That's the thing. It's like, well, if you're not an airline pilot, you're not a commercial pilot. So you're not held. It kind of, and I mean that's just a lot of people in the public not knowing aviation, but like, so you're not held to like the same standard as a commercial pilot. Technically,
right.
Yes. You also need a Part 137 endorsement or statement of competency, and that is Part 137 is the section of rules for aerial application. On top of that, from an agricultural standpoint, ag pilots are required to get their commercial pesticide license to apply crop protection products in each state. It's typically managed by each state's Department of Agriculture. Each pilot has to pass a knowledge exam, and they all depend on each state, but you pass the test, you get your license, and then a lot of those licenses have reciprocity in other states.
And this is typically a test that you would take to even run a ground sprayer, but there's just another category of test that you must take to be an aerial or a certified aerial sprayer.
It's the same as some guy that's running a sprayer for a co-op. That's a commercial operation right there. But you also, like Chad said, you got to have the flying side of that as well. That test is kind of a lot about pressures. I know they ask a lot of questions about suckback, droplet size, things of that nature, kind of how spraying pertains to the airplane. And we're not going to get into that because we could talk for hours about how a spray plane works. But anyways, that's what's required of an aerial application. Now we're moving into the quote-unquote pilot shortage. Chad, do you think we have a pilot shortage in the ag aviation industry?
I know when I was there was one. Just getting help was a struggle. And I think, what doesn't help with that is just the lack of total pilots. What did you say, 3,400 pilots?
Yeah.
And everyone's busy, especially during like the wheat season or the corn run. The majority of those 3,400 are busy. And now you're calling for help. There's just no one to come and help.
Well, I think the situation has changed a little bit with COVID because prior to COVID-19, aviation as a whole, I think, was short of pilots. I mean, like, look at the starter programs that UND had. I mean, you could get signed on at Southwest as like a junior in college and you already had a job. I mean, they needed anybody and everybody. And I think that whenever there's a pilot shortage, pay is good. I mean, you're getting big sign-on bonuses. You're getting good starting wages as a first officer. There's so many people trying to work up the ladder to, because how do we get pilot shortages in the United States? Well, it's when we got like an influx of people of a certain age and all of a sudden they're reaching retirement where they're not able to get their medical anymore. So airlines are shuffling people up the ladder fast.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get that, that means that you're moving up quick. There might not have been much interest. I think there was still decent interest in ag aviation at that point, but I think you were losing a lot of that. It's like, well, I could go load for 3 years and maybe get a seat, or I can just go get my ATP and, fly up the ladder and make a bunch of good money. And
with the flight schools, there really isn't, there's just a couple down south, but select schools that specialize or even advertise like, hey, you can do this with your commercial pilot. You can, most of them just advertise, get your commercial, then your multi-flight instructor for who knows how long, then go to the airline.
Yeah.
So that's just what every school advertises.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's easy to market because, and I was going to get into this too is a little bit later, but we can touch on it now, is like, if you're going to be in the ag aviation industry, the unfortunate thing is there is no checklist on the things you need to hash out to get in. I mean, there are some things you need to do, but it's not at all structured like the airlines. It's not like, okay, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to check all the boxes, get my degree, I'm going to graduate as a CFI, I'm going to CFI for 2 years, I'm going to get my 1,500 hours, take my ATP test, get hired by a regional, work there, get X amount of hours, move up, get X amount of hours, move up to a more national airline or whatever you want to call it. And, there isn't like, there's no ladder that you're climbing really. Like there's no structure to ag. And I think that other industries are really easy to market because people, humans naturally, we don't like uncertainty. So if I can go to a flight school and they can tell me, well, if you do XYZ in 10 years, this is how much money you're going to be making, it versus us where it's like, well, first and foremost, you need to get a loading job. You know, you need to prove to somebody that you're worth a damn because they're going to spend a bunch of money getting you started. And that's another contrast between getting into ag and getting into commercial is that when you're getting into commercial, especially when we're in a time where there is a pilot shortage, they're bringing you on and you're signing a contract saying that, okay, I'm going to guarantee you 5 years because they're going to dump a bunch of money into training you. And if I quit before this, time period ends, you're going to owe this company money because you didn't fulfill your obligation. I think you're going to start seeing that in ag here pretty soon because the thing is an operator who's going to start a young pilot is making the same investment, similar investment. If they don't already own a piston plane, they got to buy one. It costs money to buy that plane, maintain that plane, insure the plane, the pilot in it, and then it's going to take him time to train you. You're burning fuel that, he's not making money on. Why? And again, I should kind of backtrack here, but, you get a loading job to hopefully get one of those seats, and there's no guarantee because the guy wants to see if you're worth a damn and he can trust you and that it's going to be worth his time and money to get you going. And I think that's kind of a turnoff for some people is like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get a job. I mean, you and me, I'm sure both felt that. I felt that. Like when I was in South Dakota, it was like, well, I'm risking a lot being here or sacrificing a lot, I should say, just being away from home and everything. Is this worth it? Because I don't know if I'm going to get a seat or not. So,
and that's industry wide. Nothing's guaranteed. You're not guaranteed to spray so many acres. You're not guaranteed to make X amount.
Right.
Not guaranteed to get a seat.
Yeah. So just kind of wrapping that all up. I mean, I think prior to COVID, it was so easy to market it. I mean, even UND, I mean, they were so full that they had freshmen starting that couldn't take flight courses because they didn't have enough instructors because the instructors were getting jobs so fast. It was a really easy thing to market and people were buying it. And I think that may have affected us a little bit. I mean, I think a couple years ago, there was more people advertising for jobs than there are now, though. And I guess one thing I wanted to point out was like, how do we define a pilot shortage in ag? Well, let's look at how the commercial industry, I think, defines a pilot shortage. You got planes sitting that aren't moving. You have passengers that should be hauled here but aren't because you don't have the manpower to do it. And I think that applies the same to us as well, is that so to define a pilot shortage in ag is we have planes that we can't find pilots for, and there are acres being turned down because we don't have the manpower to do it. Now, I think every year, regardless, like even during busy seasons too, we have times where we're so backed up that with the manpower we have, your job might be 2-3 days out. If somebody's got 20, 30, 40,000 acres on the books, and that happens sometimes, especially on the corn run, and corn farmers and corn pilots, you guys are going to know that. You guys know that well. Every once in a while, maybe a guy pulls a job because he's like, well, it's been too long, I need to get to it. Or, maybe it dried up and he's like, I can get my ground sprayer out here, I'm going to do it. But I think when there's a when you're turning down thousands of acres because it's like, I can't get to it, I think then we have a pilot shortage. But as of right now, I don't really see that happening. I think right now the industry can't justify any more turbine planes because even though we get those busy seasons, for a week you're just so overwhelmed you maybe lose a couple thousand acres, but to have another airplane to cover that, you couldn't justify it. You know what I mean? I think we're kind of at our economic threshold, I'll say it that way, for how many planes and pilots we need. There are still jobs out there and advertised, like if you go on Aviation classifieds or whatever, you can find people looking for turbine pilots, but that's typically what they're looking for. Like they want a guy with 1,000 hours of turbine time, an air tractor or a thrush, and they want herbicide experience, whatever, Roundup experience, whatever they're spraying, Gramoxone. If you're a young guy listening to this and you're looking at that ad, you're like, that's not me. How the heck am I supposed to get into this industry? There's no advertised jobs, It's not like airlines where you can go online and you can see if they're hiring and what positions are available and so on and so forth. But to the guys that are interested in the industry that are looking to get in, do not be discouraged by what we just talked about because there are still people getting into the industry. Chad became an ag pilot 3 years ago. I got my first seat 2 years ago. I mean, we have all kinds of college friends we graduated with that, in the last couple of years got seats in piston airplanes and have moved up to turbines.
And not all jobs are posted online either. A lot of it word of mouth, or right. I know this guy who knows another guy.
Right. And there's a lot of operators who, maybe they have a piston airplane and maybe they're interested in starting a guy. They want some guy who's going to approach them with some ambition and be like, hey, I'm looking to get into the industry. I'm looking to start loading. I have a commercial license. I don't have my tail wheel endorsement, whatever. Would you be interested in hiring me? That's the guy that's going around and banging on doors right now is the guy that's getting a job. They're getting seats, and I don't want to say, I'm not going to guarantee you that you're going to get one because everybody's situation is different. I think that we don't have as many pilots flying until they're 65 anymore. I kind of see guys getting out of it like 45, 50, 55. Like they're not flying their entire life. And it seems like we're keeping enough young guys coming in to kind of keep up with that turnover. And it's not a huge turnover by any means, but it's, like I said, I mean, we still have pilots that are getting seats. There's going to be, I don't know how many, I bet there'll be 100 pilots this year that it's their first season or whatever, 50, whoever. So I see that question. The reason why I wanted to talk about this subject is because I see this question posted on the rookie, I want to be a egg pilot Facebook page. If you guys are young or you're looking to get into the industry and you want to find a group of people who are kind of in the same boat, go check out that page because there's a lot of guys that are in the industry sharing good information with you on there. And there's a lot of people in the same boat as you. So I would go check out that Facebook page. It's pretty informal. But anyways, I see this posted on there, is there a pilot shortage? Because guys want to know like, well, if there's a pilot shortage, then I have a good chance and they'll get in. Well, that's kind of the beauty of ag aviation is that it's really an individually driven thing. Like if you are a driven individual and you want to get a seat and you put your all into it, you'll get one. It's a matter of time. Timing is a big thing. Being in the right place is a big thing, but eventually you'll get it. So
I think patience is just a big thing.
Patience is a big thing, yeah. Let's move on to kind of like the lifestyle and mentality of being in the ag aviation industry. First thing I'll tell you about the lifestyle is it's a seasonal job and it revolves around the growing season in the area that you're in. So, in northern Minnesota, we plant the beginning of May and, we're done spraying by mid-September. If you go down to Texas, I've got some friends down there that are getting pretty busy right now. And I think their season is, their 2021 season is spooling up right now. Really depends on where you're at. And then also being that it's a seasonal job, you get your winters off. Chad, you might recall our winters off were not very productive.
No, less than productive.
I hate to admit it. I don't hate to admit it. I don't care. We played a lot of Farming Simulator in our time off. But
I did get my CFI that one winter, though.
You did. I did not.
So that was semi-productive.
We were working on getting our CFIs together, and you finished, and I did not. And there's a good mentor of mine that might be listening to this. I can hear him right now. He wants me to get my CFI done, and I agree with him. I should get it done. But Chad's instance, so tell us a little bit about like your work schedule, quick, just to compare it to ag. But so you work year round, but you're kind of on shifts.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like?
Yeah, so it's 8 days on, 6 days off. So those 8 days on, you can either be on call, actively flying. Who knows where you'll be at any time during those 8 days. But your 6 days off are, those are year-free days. You can do whatever you want, go wherever you want. You're not tied to answer your phone or do anything like that, which is quite different than, what I experienced when I was flying ag work. Yeah. And which is kind of, I guess, which is kind of why I left. The ag flying is unpredictable. You could be going out at noon on Sunday. You could be flying for 10 days, north of 10 days straight. You could not be flying at all.
Right.
So it's just the variability. You don't know when you're going to have time off, if you're trying to plan a trip or a vacation, which that better not be planned, at least in Minnesota, between May and, October.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, you kind of, at least in your schedule now, you kind of get a break, like you said. I mean, ag, when we're working, we're working. You don't have a,
Right.
Even like we're trying to plan my bachelor party right now. I'd really love to go to one of the lakes in Minnesota during the summertime, but unfortunately I just can't guarantee that I'm going to be there. So hopefully we can squeeze some time in April and go prepare myself to be wed.
But it's a give and take. I'm like all the egg pilots they have in Minnesota, or like yourself, have all the time off in the winter. But then when summer comes, it's time to make your yearly living. So
yeah,
you kind of got to commit to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like even for us, me and my fiance built a house this summer. We didn't finish the majority of it because let's save some money, and we've got me who does not work all winter. That's capable of subpar drywall work.
I did come up there one weekend to help you, and we didn't get anything done.
Yeah, you came up to help me finish the garage, and it's still not done. We didn't do anything. So, but yeah, wintertime, you're kind of free to do. You're not on unemployment. I've heard people ask me that all the time. It's like, oh, so you're done flying for the year, so you're on unemployment now? No. Oh, well, why not? Don't you? No, I don't get laid off. I'm still employed. I can't file for unemployment. Although it'd be nice to get a free $600 check every week. I can't do that. A lot of guys do different things during the winter. A lot of egg pilots are A&Ps or AIs, and they're working on their own airplanes or in somebody's shop during the wintertime wrenching. One thing that everybody should understand too is that you need to go to where the work is. So unfortunately, that, for me, when I wanted to become a loader, there wasn't any loading jobs around here. I helped one of the guys at the airport in Crookston for 3 days, and he's like, I've got a good loader. I can't afford to hire another one and pay you to sit around and do nothing. So got a hold of some people I knew, ended up in South Dakota loading for 2 years. And when an opportunity opened up for me back home, I went back here. And when that opportunity wasn't working out so well, as much as I'd like to buy my own airplane and start a business in Crookston, there's already 3 operators in the area. That's impossible. Got a hold of another guy, and turns out he was looking for a pilot. And now I'm 2 hours away from home in Devil's Lake. So it's something you just kind of, I haven't moved everywhere. I traveled. I was fortunate enough to have a good place to stay in South Dakota. And now during the summer times in Devil's Lake, I stay in a camper. Everyone's like, oh, that must be awesome. You have a camper on the best lake in North Dakota. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm never there during the daylight. So it's not really that great, I guess. But
that's something with the whole aviation industry. I'm gone, away from home for 8 days at a time. If you're going to be a pilot, you have to get used to, being away from home, away from friends, family.
Yeah, unfortunately, no one's looking for a charter from your local airport to another local airport. You're not just going to be able to work wherever you're sitting. But
in egg aviation, you might be, spraying out of your hometown, but you're still not really there during the busy season or the working season. You might see them from, hour in the morning, an hour at night, but every day you're out and flying and working. And
so egg pilots, they work pretty hard, and we work pretty long hours. One thing about the job I've learned a lot about in the first 2 years of my career so far has been how mentally exhausting it is, and it can be very physically exhausting as well, because your mind is moving all the time. As a young guy, I think it affects us more than seasoned pilots. I want to ask Chad, from working in the egg environment to going to a charter environment, do you think that the mental and physical task of egg flying is more difficult than what you're doing now?
I think the physical task more than anything. You get the 100-degree days, it's hot, you're in and out a lot, lots of takeoffs, lots of landings. The more commercial side of flying is, to me, it can be very mentally tasking. You're dealing with weather or passengers or just some of the scheduling things that go on, busy airspace, lots of communication. You're trying to get multiple things done in a timely manner. So that can also be mentally tasking. It's different than the mental tasking of egg flying, where you're looking out for wires, thinking ahead, thinking about where your spray is going, that sort of deal. But it's, flying is tasking. I mean, no matter what kind you're doing. So
yeah, I think the biggest thing with egg is just how it's so all at once, right? Like you're either
right.
And it all kind of, the thing with egg is like, it just kind of compiles. Like, you start out, like even me this season and you prior to, I mean, you start out in that turbine, things are happening faster. You're trying to learn what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You're learning how to stay ahead. And then on top of that, it feels like about the time you're like, I think I got this. And then the busy season starts and it's like, nope, I don't. Because now you're sleeping, a couple hours a night. You're flying 12 hours a day on the tack and you're up for 18 hours of the day. It just, that plays big into the physical, I think. I mean, and obviously it plays big into the mental too. Once you start running out of juice, you start slowing down in the head. That's for sure. That's a part of being in the industry, but you learn, if you got a good mentor and you pay attention to yourself, you know how you operate, you'll pull yourself out of that airplane when you start getting tired and rest up. I remember, the pancake breakfast we used to host in Crookston. There's this guy from Gonvick that came. He was 92 years old, and he was an egg pilot his whole life. And I asked him, I said, what kind of advice could you give to some guy that hasn't even started yet? And he said, when you become a pilot, he told me, take naps and shower every night. And I just laughed. I was like, really? That's what a guy with that much experience, that's what he had to say, but he was so right on. He was so spot on. Like my first year in the egg truck, I felt bad because there was probably like 4 or 5 times during the season that I would stop, shut down, and take a nap, and you were able to keep going. And I was just like, God, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But as time goes on, it seems like you kind of start to manage. I think maybe you start to learn to manage yourself and what you're doing a little bit better. And maybe you start to fly the airplane a little bit smoother, and you're just kind of overall easier on yourself. And then obviously,
you just kind of find your groove.
Right.
But, that takes time too. Or, I was on the 32 NOS energy drinks a day regimen.
Yeah, that's another topic for another day. Egg pilot fuel. Everyone's got their poison, it seems like. Yeah, I mean, I was like, God, I'd ask him, I'd wake up from a nap and be like, how are you doing? And you're like, I'm doing just fine. Rips a NOS.
Yep.
But
time for another.
Yep. Hey, you know what? You might have a heart attack at 50, but you didn't crash while you're an egg pilot, so good job.
It's still pumping.
Still pumping. Good to hear. So that's kind of a little bit about hard work and long hours. And that kind of I hate to just talk about the pilot perspective, but talk about the ground crew too. I was kind of fortunate at the company I worked for in South Dakota. We were able to learn a lot and do a lot of the management on the ground. We handled all the maps, chemical inventory. We handled making our own load sheets and things like that. It was kind of fun and stressful in Nebraska. I know there was this rule that we had to call the guys every time before we went to go start an application. And so felt like I was on the phone every 20 minutes trying to get a hold of somebody and make sure their pivot was turned off so we didn't show up and that was on. That was really hard on me. I got really exhausted trying to manage all that stuff on my own, but I'm glad I got to do it because one thing that's good about loading is that you gain the perspective of the people that are working for you as a pilot, and you have sympathy for them and understanding. I think, and I kind of learned this summer too. It's kind of easy as a pilot to get impatient with loaders, but when we get really busy, loader job isn't a piece of cake. I mean, if you got 3 planes, I mean, you went to southern Minnesota and loaded. I mean, you get a couple airplanes going. You're a busy guy. Sometimes it's hard to keep up, just like it's hard to keep up in the air some days it's hard to keep up on the ground.
But when you're loading, I always thought like, oh man, it'd be nice to be the pilot. And, you're trying to help them and you want to help them, but at the same time, you might not be as focused as like, you're just looking to get to that next step. But when you're the one doing the flying, you don't really realize how much that they can make your job easy or hard.
Yeah. And that's the thing about being a loader, and we're going to kind of talk about this when I get to the mentality side of things, is that like you're always learning. Somebody has been there and done that, and they know some things that make your life easier. And that's how I think that's a principle that should stand at any perspective of life, really, really as egg pilots and even as ground crew. Like that was preached to me from the beginning. You're always learning. You never got it all figured out. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the egg community, egg aviation community as well. 3,700 or 3,400 pilots, that's not a lot of people in the grand scheme of things. We're a very small community. I really enjoy our community in the Red River Valley up here. Everybody seems to know everybody. Everybody gets along pretty well for the most part. It's kind of like small town farm community is what it is. And you go to the state conventions and see all the guys that are in your region, and you know a lot of them, and you have a good time. And NAAA national conventions, those are the same too. I mean, I enjoy going to those. You meet a lot of people from around the country that you end up staying in contact with, and it's a lot of fun. And like the more perspectives you hear, the more you learn, the better you are. So one thing I'd really like to share, when I was in Savannah this year for the NAAA convention, our opening breakfast, this completely caught me off guard. The president of the NAAA stood up and said, "Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance." We put our hands on our heart, faced the flag, and said the Pledge of Allegiance. And then after that, he invited a gentleman up to say a prayer before we eat. That's the type of people you're dealing with. I'm not going to attach a title or a brand name to that, but it's a really good community. I was really touched by that. I mean, when was the last time you went somewhere, said the Pledge of Allegiance, and prayed before you sat down and ate? Doesn't happen a lot. We're kind of getting into the mentality of things right now. If you're going to be in the industry, you got to have attention to detail, and that applies, again, as a loader and as a pilot. You're messing around with chemical that costs hundreds of dollars a gallon. You know, you can't be dumping it on the ground. You can't be putting the wrong amounts in. You know, a farmer brings you chemical, and he brings you 7.5, and you're supposed to use 6, and he gets a full 2.5 back. He's going to be like, well, why didn't you use all the chemical? Or you use up his whole 7.5, and he's wondering, what the heck? You owe me for 1.5 gallons of Prosaro or something. So you got to have good attention to detail, because we got to be right on the money, doing right by everybody. And that applies to the air as well when we're making applications. I mean, our mentality has to be that when we're taking care of somebody's crop, we're taking care of it like our own. So the first 2 fields of Roundup I sprayed, one was wheat burn down and one was Roundup on soybeans. And it was for one of our best customers. Their grandson is one of our loader guys, awesome people, and the grandfather actually was an ag pilot in the area, and of course I get their stuff to do for my first try, and my boss, you know, he coached me up as best as he could, and it was just time for me to go out and do my first couple passes, or do my first fields of herbicide and see what the results were, to make sure I was doing a good job. And I did what I thought I needed to do to get the edges, and turns out, you know, a week later, they're like, kind of missed some edges along the road here. I felt horrible, because like I said, these guys are great customers and they deserve to have a good job done, and I didn't get it done. You're always learning. Now I know how to hit an edge. I got my mirrors now. I know exactly where I need to see my spray land and to do that. So attention to detail it's a big deal. And it doesn't just apply to application. It applies to taking care of airplanes and how we manage ourselves as well. The one thing I really enjoy about ag aviation is how honest it makes you, because just like that story about me skipping the edge, like, I can't fib that. You know, I mean, there's no way you can BS your way out of, well, it was the plane's fault, or it was a chemical. The rest of the field is clean. You left a foot or 2 feet of edges around the whole field. I mean, there's just no hiding that. So it makes you honest. You're forced to be honest. I mean, you should be honest. You can really take a lot of pride in what you're doing, because you will see the results of everything that you do. Even just keeping yourself on the right side of the grass, you know, there's a lot to be proud of there. Lastly, one thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to mentality and the lifestyle is that you gotta love it. Like, and I heard that was the first thing anybody ever told me about ag aviation. And when I first asked one of my mentors about it, he's like, you gotta love this. If you don't love it, you're going to hate it. I love it, and I love what I do, and even though it gets stressful and I get burned out sometimes, the funny thing is even after, let's say we finish a run, you know, the last day of the run, I'm like, screw this, I want to go home. But a week later, it's like, okay, I'm done being a pouty pants. I'm ready to get back in the plane and do this. But so we have to address the elephant in the room now. Why did Chad leave ag aviation and go to be a charter pilot? Was it because you didn't love it?
I just really didn't like the unknowns of it. You don't know how much money you're going to, you don't know how much you're going to get paid, what days off you're going to have, when you're going to start working, when you're going to be done, what you're doing, 2 hours from now. That's where with the charter, I like the consistency of the schedule, the consistency of the pay. And that all boils down to, I liked it. I didn't love it.
Right.
I thought I loved it. I think it was a lot of just it's new to me. It's your first job out of college. You're like, this is awesome. Do it for a couple weeks. I still liked it. I never didn't like it. I never loved it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, super passionate about it. It's like, yep, this is cool. I enjoy it. I care about it, but not enough to devote my whole life to it.
Just to preface something, I'm not sharing Chad's experience to talk anybody out of being an egg pilot. You're going to see both sides of the story. This is kind of for the guys that are thinking about it, or guys that are in it that are questioning it, I guess. When you kind of came to realize, like, I might want to try something else, did that kind of impact your flying, and did that impact your attitude when you were coming to work in the morning?
Maybe a little bit, but I just looked forward to the next thing, but I didn't let it affect, the quality. Whatever I'm doing, I try to, do it the best that you can do, even though you might be leaving in a month or a week or whatever, still getting the job done and getting it done right.
Right.
No matter what, but more of excitement. I'm looking ahead like, oh, this is going to be fun to do. I look forward to going and do that.
One thing too is that, you were 5 hours away from your hometown and a good chunk of your family, your wife's family. Mm-hmm. And, I think, that too, that's a part of the lifestyle, is that, like I said, you had to be where the work was. And for you, the work was in Crookston. And
right.
It was, it might've been kind of hard on both of you guys to be away from home all the time. And, with your charter job, you were able to go home. That kind of played a big factor, right?
Right. And you're away from home, you're 2 hours away. You know what that's like. I mean, it's probably not enjoyable, but you just drive 2 hours and then you're home, or driving 5 hours. Like, well, if you want to go home and back, that's a 10-hour commitment.
That's how it was for me when I was in South Dakota too. It's like, well, Friday comes around and it's 5 o'clock and, nobody's called in to have anything sprayed for the weekend. And you're like, okay, well, I'll be home by 10 or 11 tonight. And then I got to leave early enough on Sunday to get there and go to bed and be ready to get up early Monday morning. It's like it feels like you eat up most of the weekend just driving, and you're right. Like for me, when I thought about leaving again and moving out of town to work, 2 hours really isn't a big deal. I mean, when we're doing fertilizer at the beginning of the year or whatever, and I need to be to work by 7 o'clock, I can leave here at 5 and be there by 7. It's not the end of the world. Or like same thing, Friday comes around. Oh, it's 5 o'clock on Friday. Nobody needs anything sprayed this weekend. I'm going to be home by 7 o'clock. I can actually, sit by the bonfire or get something accomplished while there's some daylight left, where when you're that far away from home, it's such a pain just to get there. But, and then same thing during the wintertime too. I mean, it's kind of like, so you would have had to move back home if you wanted to be there, you and your wife, and then you would have to figure out some accommodations to come back up and spray and be away from each other for a long period of time. And, that's one big thing about being an egg pilot, is if you have some sort of a partner that they support you, and that you both have to be comfortable with what you're doing, right? Like, you don't want your wife to be stressed out about you being gone all the time. Maybe you don't feel comfortable with her being home alone a bunch of the time. That impacts both of you, and I think at the end of the day, relationships are more important than jobs, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Right.
That's our introductory episode to the Ag Aviator podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I didn't want to drill down on one specific topic and spend a bunch of time on that today. I kind of wanted to introduce myself, introduce Chad, because we didn't get to hear a lot from you today, Chad, but I know you do have a lot of good insight. You had a year's more experience when we worked together, and you definitely helped me get through that year. We both ended up being safe. There's something to be said about that. So hopefully me and Chad can share our experiences about getting started, maybe turbine transition, stuff like that in the future. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, you're welcome.
What do I owe you?
There's not enough money, Andy. just a plug, the username, hashtag.
I'll give you the deed to my house. How about that?
That might do it.
Yeah.
Good down payment.
Yeah. So you don't really have a social media that anybody's going to follow you on, do you?
No, I don't. No. I mean, if they do follow me, I don't post anyway. So.
Yeah. Thanks again, Chad, for being on. I hope you guys found this thing enjoyable and useful. That's Ag Aviation in a nutshell. That's going to be our podcast moving forward in a nutshell. Thanks again to Travis Am and American Designs for sponsoring this podcast. We're going to have him on, interview him, talk about his pilot experience and what he's doing with his company. So with that, thank you everybody for tuning in to the first episode of the Ag Aviator podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to share, like, and comment wherever you see it. Let us know what you think. I'm excited to see what this has to bring. We'll talk to you later.